This story was sent to us by a viewer named Mark. The events took place during the winter of 2015 in a desolate mountainous region of Pennsylvania. At the time, Mark worked for an IT firm and frequently had to make long drives back to his hometown on weekends. Those Pennsylvania back roads look ominous enough during the day, but at night, they turn into endless corridors of pitch-black darkness. It was a Thursday night. Mark didn't finish work until 11:30 p.m. A heavy snowstorm was forecasted, so he was anxious to get home as quickly as possible. He hopped into his old Ford sedan and began the journey. Because of construction on the main highway, he was forced to take Route 29, a notorious, winding road that cuts through miles of dense forest. By 1:30 a.m., the towering pines on either side of the road felt like they were closing in on him. The snow hadn't started yet, but the fog was so thick that his headlights could only penetrate a few feet ahead. There wasn't a single other car on the road. The radio was nothing but a wall of static, so Mark turned it off, leaving him alone with nothing but the hum of the engine and his own thoughts.
Suddenly, he noticed a pair of headlights in his rearview mirror, far off in the distance. In a place this isolated, Mark actually felt a brief sense of relief. He thought it was comforting to know another human being was out there. However, that relief lasted only a few minutes before turning into pure dread. The vehicle behind him gained ground with alarming speed. Mark was doing about 45 miles per hour, but the car behind him seemed intent on tailgating him. To be polite, Mark pulled over slightly to the right to let the car pass, but strangely, the vehicle didn't overtake him. Instead, it slowed down, hovering just inches from his rear bumper.
The vehicle was a massive matte black SUV with windows so deeply tinted they looked like voids. Mark grew annoyed, assuming it was just an aggressive teenager or a drunk driver. He sped up to 60 miles per hour, but the SUV matched his speed instantly. He swerved right, the SUV swerved right. After 5 minutes of this cat-and-mouse game, the SUV suddenly began flashing its high beams repeatedly. The blinding light reflected off Mark's mirrors, searing his eyes. He realized then that this wasn't an accident. The driver was intentionally harassing him. Cell service is non-existent in that part of Pennsylvania. Mark checked his phone. No service. He was completely on his own.
Just then, he saw an old, dilapidated rest stop up ahead. Thinking he could either let the driver pass or find some kind of help, Mark jerked the wheel and pulled into the parking lot. The place was littered with trash, illuminated only by a single flickering sodium lamp. Mark stopped his car, but kept the engine running, waiting to see what the SUV would do. The black SUV pulled in right behind him, but instead of parking in a stall, it swung around and blocked Mark's car horizontally, trapping him.
Mark's heart hammered against his ribs. He watched as the SUV's door slowly creaked open. A massive man stepped out. He was wearing a grimy hunting jacket and a baseball cap pulled low, masking his face in shadow. He didn't appear to have a weapon, but his gait was terrifying, slow, deliberate, almost mechanical. The man walked up to Mark's window. Mark kept the glass rolled up, staring out in terror. The man didn't knock or say a word. He simply reached into his pocket, pulled out an old Polaroid photo, and pressed it firmly against the glass.
When Mark saw the photo, the air left his lungs. It was a picture taken only minutes ago. The photo showed Mark's car driving down the highway, but there was something else. Clinging to the undercarriage of Mark's car was a pale, skeletal hand, reaching upward, trying to grip the handle of the rear door. The hand in the photo didn't look human. The fingers were unnaturally long and gray. As Mark sat there, paralyzed by the image, he heard it, a faint, metallic scratching sound coming from the back of his own car. Someone or something was trying to pry open the rear door from the outside. The SUV driver suddenly slammed his fist against the window and screamed, "Lock the doors and drive! Get out of here now!" Mark didn't wait another second. He slammed the car into reverse, swerved around the SUV's bumper, and floored it back onto the main road. In the mirror, he saw the black SUV following close behind. But Mark realized now that the man in the SUV wasn't the hunter. He was the one trying to warn him. The real danger wasn't behind Mark's car. It was underneath it, and it was now trying to crawl inside.
Mark didn't look back. He floored the gas pedal, his tires screeching as he peeled away from the rest stop and back onto the fog-shrouded Route 29. In his rearview mirror, the black SUV swung back onto the road, following him closely. But this time, Mark wasn't afraid of the man behind him. He was terrified for the man behind him to stay close. He knew that the SUV driver was his only witness, his only protector. The adrenaline was surging through Mark's veins, but so was a cold, paralyzing dread. He tried to focus on the road, but the metallic scratching sound returned. It wasn't coming from the outside anymore. It was coming from the interior of the car's rear panel.
Pennsylvania winters are brutal, and Mark's old Ford had a small rust hole near the rear wheel well, something he'd ignored for months. Now he could hear a wet, rhythmic thumping against the metal frame, followed by a sound that made his stomach turn. The sound of plastic and fabric tearing. Whatever was underneath his car was prying its way in. Mark reached for his phone again, desperation clouding his mind. Still no service. He glanced at the SUV behind him. The driver was frantically flashing his lights and pointing toward the roof of Mark's car. Mark's eyes darted to the sunroof. It was closed, but through the glass he saw a shadow, a long, thin appendage draped over the edge, tapping rhythmically against the glass. Tap, tap, tap. It sounded like a bone hitting a hollow pipe. Mark began to scream, but no sound came out. His throat was tight with terror. He realized the thing hadn't just stayed under the car. It had climbed up the back while he was driving at 60 miles per hour.
Suddenly, the scratching stopped. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of the wind and the engine. Mark allowed himself one breath of hope. Maybe it fell off. Maybe it was gone. Then he heard a soft, muffled grunt from the back seat. Mark looked into the rearview mirror, but it was too dark to see anything clearly. He reached over and flicked on the interior dome light. The small yellow bulb illuminated the cabin, and for a split second, Mark wished he had stayed in the dark. The rear driver's side door lock was slowly, manually being pulled down from the inside. A long gray finger, lacking a nail finger and covered in what looked like road grime and dried blood, was hooked around the lock pin. The door wasn't just being unlocked, it was being unlatched.
Mark slammed on his brakes, hoping to throw the intruder off balance. His car fishtailed on the icy asphalt. The black SUV behind him had to swerve to avoid a collision. As Mark's car came to a jarring halt in the middle of the dark highway, the rear door swung wide open. The freezing winter air rushed into the car, but it wasn't the cold that made Mark freeze. It was the sight of a figure crouching on the floorboards behind his seat. It was a man, or what used to be a man. He was wearing nothing but tattered rags, his skin a sickly, translucent gray. His limbs were unnaturally long, folded like a spider's legs to fit into the cramped space. The intruder didn't attack immediately. He just sat there, his head tilted at a 90-degree angle, staring at Mark with wide, lidless eyes that reflected the dim yellow light of the dome lamp. He opened his mouth, revealing rows of broken, sharpened teeth, and whispered a single word that shattered Mark's sanity. Home.
Mark sat frozen, his breath hitching in his chest, as the spider-like man whispered that chilling word. The creature's lidless eyes never blinked, and the smell emanating from the back seat was a mix of wet earth and something rotted. Just as the creature began to uncoil its long gray limbs to reach for Mark's throat, a deafening roar broke the silence of the Pennsylvania night. The black SUV had pulled up parallel to Mark's car. The massive man from the SUV didn't hesitate. He jumped out while his vehicle was still coasting, carrying a heavy tire iron. "Get out of the car, Mark! Now!" the man bellowed.
Mark didn't need to be told twice. He threw himself out of the driver's side door, collapsing onto the icy asphalt. He scrambled toward the SUV just as the creature in his back seat let out a high-pitched screeching hiss, a sound no human throat should be able to produce. The SUV driver stood his ground between Mark and the car. He wasn't just a random stranger. As the light from the SUV's headlights hit his face, Mark saw a badge hanging from a chain around his neck. He was an off-duty state trooper who had been patrolling this stretch of Route 29 for weeks, looking for a local legend known only as the Hitcher. The creature lunged from the back seat with terrifying speed, but the trooper was faster. He swung the iron bar, connecting with the creature's shoulder. There was a sickening crack, but the thing didn't scream. It simply tumbled back into the darkness of the woods bordering the highway, disappearing into the fog like it was never there.
The trooper helped Mark up, his hands steady despite the chaos. "That thing, it's been living in the abandoned mine shafts beneath this road," the trooper explained, his voice low. "It doesn't want money. It looks for cars with rusted undercarriages, easy ways to climb inside and find a home for the night. You were lucky I saw it crawl under your bumper at the last gas station." They waited for backup to arrive, but a search of the woods yielded nothing. The creature was gone, back into the lightless depths of the earth. Mark never drove Route 29 again. In fact, he sold the Ford sedan the very next week. He tells people he just wanted a newer car, but the truth is much darker. Every time he gets into a vehicle now, he doesn't check the tires or the engine. Instead, he bends down, flashlight in hand, and checks the undercarriage, praying that he never sees a pale, skeletal hand reaching back out at him. Because Mark knows that out there, in the desolate corners of America, some things are looking for a home, and they don't care if you're still inside it.